Hello children, welcome back to your online class. In my last video, I was teaching the chapter Achilles to the students of standard 7 in literature. Now today, I'll continue with the same chapter, page number 86. So in my last video, I told you how the narrator, that is a small boy, along with his dog, came and met the rose beetle man, and he had so many fascinating things along with him, and also his appearance was something very different from everyone. Okay, and he was very much attracted towards him, the narrator. Now see, exhausted by his explanation, he sat down because he was not speaking anything. Okay, the narrator kept on asking so many things, but the rose beetle man just tried to answer in gestures. Exhausted by his explanation, he sat down, played a short tune on his flute, breaking off to sing to his curious voice. They were not clear words, but a series of strange grunting. Presently, he stuffed his flute into his pocket and then swung a small sack off his shoulder. He brought down that sack. See in the picture, he undid it. He just opened it, and to my astonishment, half a dozen tortoises tumbled out into the dusty road. See, these tortoises came out from there. Their shells had been polished with oil, and he had decorated the front legs with little red bows. See, the front legs, it is decorated by little red bows, and the shell was painted with oil. Okay, it was polished, it was shining. Now slowly the tortoises unpacked their heads. Okay, they brought out their heads and legs from their gleaming shell and set off down the road without enthusiasm. I watched them fascinated. The one that particularly took my fancy was small, with a shell the size of a teacup. It seemed it seemed sprightlier than others. Its eyes were bright and its walk was alert. I sat looking at it for a long time. I convinced myself that the family would greet its arrival at the villa with enthusiasm. So, when the narrator saw all the tortoises, actually he was attracted by one particular tortoise, okay, which was very active and walked in a certain different kind of way, that is as if it was very alert. Okay, so he thought that if he takes the tortoise to his house, then everybody will be very much fascinated and happy to see that animal there. So the fact was that I had no money on me, did not worry me. He did not bring any money with him. I would simply tell the man to call at the villa for payment. He never occurred to me that he might not trust me. The fact that I was English was sufficient. For the islanders had a love and respect for the Englishman. So these islanders, these people, they actually respected this Englishman. So he knew that if he told him to come to his place and take money, then he would really agree. So he asked the rose beetle man the price of the little tortoise. He held up both hands, fingers spread out. I shook my head firmly and held up two fingers, unconsciously imitating him. Okay, so he took out all the fingers of both his hands. That means that he wanted that much of money. But the narrator took out two, and he thought that he will agree. Then what the rose beetle man did, the rose beetle man, he closed his eyes in horror, as if it was surprised at the thought, and held up 9 fingers. So they tried to bargain. Okay, I held up 3. Then the rose beetle man looked sorrowful and sighed. So we sat in silence and stared at the tortoise crawling uncertainly about the road. Then the rose beetle man picked up the reptile and showed me in pantomime how lovely its shell was. He handed me the tortoise and held up 5 fingers. So the rose beetle man was trying to tell everything why he is asking that much of money, because this tortoise was not just like other tortoise. says, okay. So he wanted that much of, and at last it was agreed that he said that give me 5, means he took out 5 fingers. I told him that I had no money on me and that he could have to come to the villa. He nodded as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Excited by owing this pet, I wanted to get back home quickly to show it to everyone. So I hurried off along the road. Before diving down the hillside, I glanced back. The rose beetle man was still in the same place wobbling his flute. Okay, so finally he took that tortoise. The new arrival was christened Achilles. So the name was chosen, Achilles, for that new tortoise, and turned out to be an intelligent beast with a sense of humor. He learned his name soon, and we had to call out once or twice. He would appear lumbering along on tiptoe. He loved being fed and would squat regally in the sun while we held our bits of lettuce. He loved grapes as much as Roger did. So both Roger and Tortoise loved grapes. Okay, so there was always great rivalry. Achilles would sit mumbling the grapes in his mouth. And the juice running down his chin, and Roger would lie watching him, his mouth drooling saliva. Okay, so they both of them wanted to eat grapes, and Roger would go on mumbling the grapes, and the tortoise would look at him, and the saliva would come out as if he wanted to eat everything and not give to each other. Now Roger always had his fair share of the fruit, but even so he seemed to think to ways to give delicacies to a tortoise. Roger never wanted to give a small bite also of the grape to the tortoise. When the feeding was over, if I didn't keep an eye on him, Roger would creep up to Achilles and lick him vigorously to get the grape juice that the reptile had dribbled down on himself. Then Achilles would retreat into his shell with an indignant wheeze and refuse to come out until we had removed Roger from the scene. So this was the scene that the tortoise also did not want to go near Roger because he would lick him and he take away all the grapes. But the fruit that Achilles liked best was wild strawberries. He would become hysterical at the mere sight of them. The small strawberries he could devour at a gulp, for they were the size of the fat pea. So he would just swallow it. But if you gave him a big one, he would grab the fruit and holding it firmly in his mouth, stumble off at top speed and until he reached a quiet spot where he would eat it at leisure. So if it was a big one, he would run away and in a place where he could sit quietly and just enjoy that strawberry. Then Achilles had developed a passion for human company because he started staying with human beings. Let everyone come into the garden, and there would be a rustling among the bushes, and Achilles' wrinkled and earnest face would poke through. So as whenever Achilles saw that all the people of the house came in the garden, then the tortoise also would be very happy and come out there to just play with them and be in their company. Now, if you were sitting in a chair, he contented himself with getting as close to your feet as possible, and there he would sink into a deep sleep. Okay, and if you were lying on a rug sunbathing, he would surge down the path and onto the rug with an expression of bemused good humor on his face. He would survey you and then choose a portion of your body on which to practice mountaineering. If you shook him off, it would only give you temporary respite, for Achilles would circle the garden until he found you again. So, he only tried to be near human beings anyhow. Then one day what happened? The garden gate was left open and Achilles was nowhere to be found. Search parties were immediately organized and the family wandered about the olive groves shouting, Achilles, strawberries, Achilles. At length we found him. He had fallen into a well, the wall of which had long since disintegrated. He was, to our regret, quite dead. Even Leslie's attempts at artificial respiration and Margot's suggestion of forcing strawberries down his throat to give him, as he explained, something to live for failed to get any response. So they tried to revive it by giving artificial respiration or forcing strawberries in his throat, but then they could not. Then at last they understood it was dead. His corpse was buried in the garden under a small strawberry plant. A short funeral address read in a trembling voice by Larry made the occasion memorable. It was only marred, okay, by Roger, okay. So the whole thing, that sad, that small funeral, okay, the sadness and all was just damaged by Roger, because by wagging his tail, he kept on wagging throughout, okay. They all tried to stop him, but he did not, and he wagged his tail throughout the burial service. Note, long after Achilles had been taken from us, okay, that means he died, I opted another pet from the rose beetle man. Again he brought another pet from the rose beetle man, and this time it was a pigeon who was named Quasimodo. And thus began the next round of adventure in our family. So this whole chapter, no, you can understand how Gerald Malcolm Durrell had love for animals. So this is all in this chapter. Thank you.